Hello Drone Racers, I'm Mark, and this time on Drone Racer 101 we're going to take a look at the FrSky X-Lite next to a couple of other FrSky radios. I've got the QX7 here and the X9D SE. If you watch my Taranis roundup, you'll know that these are the two radios which I generally recommend as the low-end starter radio, and the high-end comes with all the Hall effect gimbals and everything you want in a high-end radio. This is the one my son has been flying. This is the one that I have been flying pretty much non-stop since I got it. So I'm going to do my best to get everything all in frame here to take up quite a bit of space by the time we're done. But here are the three radios and just kind of my hand for reference. So these two are traditional radio size. They're about the same, and it is noticeably smaller. It fits well within, you know what, the overall space. So I found a tape measure. So the X-Lite is about 7 inches by 5.5 inches, we're gonna say. We're gonna round these into nice big long numbers. The QX7 is about 7 3/4 by about 6 3/4, and the X9D is about 7.5. See, it depends on where you measure, by 7. So it's deceptive though, because, well, one, the X9D is a lot taller. It's about 3 inches versus about 2 inches versus about 2 inches. So it has a lot more volume to it. The cutout here actually makes things look a lot smaller with the X-Lite. So side by side, it looks a lot smaller than these others, but really space-wise, it's not a huge difference. With them all powered on, they are not happy about being this close to one another. So the screens are one of the biggest difference. And honestly, I didn't realize how small the X-Lite screen is. I mean, it's obviously smaller, but it is a lot smaller. So it's about 3/4 of an inch by 1 3/4 of an inch, which is pretty tiny. The X7 is about 1.5 by 2.5 by the time we get to usable space, 2 3/4, somewhere in there. And the X9D is about 1.5 by 4. You get a lot more information on the X9D. One of the things I noticed though is the QX7 is a lot bigger screen, but its resolution doesn't seem to be any better. If we turn the light on, the resolution, partially because it's just smaller and it can get away with it with the X-Lite, it looks clearer. This is very blocky. This is just not. Programming wise, I think the QX7 is still one of the easiest, with the menu button to go in and then the dial. I just still really like the dial. It makes it very easy to use. Once you figure out though that holding left is the same as holding down the menu button on these radios, and holding right actually takes you into your models, it's pretty easy to navigate. This stick is okay. It's not as fast as the QX7. It also, in some ways though, seems to be slower than having the buttons on the X9D, because you can't just click as fast as you can. Like when you go up, it's as fast as it's going to go. There's no making it go faster. Versus the dial, here I can just go down pretty darn quick, and the stick just isn't quite as fast. So I've got my Diatone GT200 here, and I'm actually going to bind the radios. I'm actually going to bind this to the radios so you can see the difference in the screens when there's a model connected, when you have a receiver that actually supports full telemetry. Okay, so I've got this set up and paired with the model. I have my battery voltage for my radio. I have an RSSI value, but it's just in bars. And if I hold down the page, I've set up VFAS, which is the battery voltage on the model, on a separate screen, but I don't see it on the main screen. So I've never been a really big fan of that, but that's what we get. Now I've done the same thing with the X9D, and with a bigger screen, I have my battery voltage in the radio. I have my RSSI value still just in bars, but then I also have the voltage of the model, which is just handy when I plug something in and I can see at a glance really quickly what that data is. Okay, so here's the X Plus. So it's pretty much the same as the X7, which isn't surprising considering the SD card was the same as the X7. I have the battery voltage. I have bars for the RSSI. If I hold down, I go through the multiple pages. So there I'm at 11.2 volts, pretty much the same as the X7. I think this is, for the most part, just a miniature X7 screen. But this is the first model I've set up with this, and I'll say it was really easy. It was exactly the same as the others, so I will do a video on that, but I didn't have any problem binding it. And this is an XSR-M. Okay, how does it feel compared to the other two? This is going to be super personal preference, so I'm just going to tell you what I think. I am very biased because I have been flying a X9D for 4 years now. Now, the Hall effect gimbals in this, I have absolutely come to love. It's been very hard to make a change when I had to go back to another radio. The switches are very crisp. I can feel them. I know where they are. I do like the centering. I think both of these center, don't they? Yeah, these both center for the dials. Same for the knobs on the back, which I don't use very often, but if I did want to use it for volume, I know some people actually use this for volume on the radio itself to control how loud it is. But some planes you may want to use this for landing gears or flaps or something. They work really well for. I like the positions of the switches. I have my arming switch, I have my mode switch. I just know where everything is. Now it's kind of a cheap plasticky feel, especially with this texture on it. It's just not, it's an older radio, and it doesn't have the feel of some super high-end radios, but I've really, really come to love these gimbals a lot. Versus what a lot of people are gonna wanna compare this to, the X7, the QX7, these gimbals, they're rough. They just feel really rough by comparison, especially the throttle. That's the biggest one. I can just feel the grit in it. And I don't like, these are totally interchangeable, but I don't like these texture on these, the way they dig in. They just don't feel nice. It doesn't feel nice. The switches have a pretty good click to them. They're still not bad. I don't mind that. The dial I still love. I think this is the best configuration for this for programming. I was glad they updated this on the Horus, even though I'm not really a fan of the Horus and the battery situation that it has. The dial I think was a huge improvement for these. So now, having just held both of those, how does this feel? Feels pretty good. It feels pretty good. I was a little concerned about the throttle. It took me a while to get the throttle adjusted just right, but it doesn't move. It has a really good feel. I was afraid, having held that and feeling the throttle there, that this was going to feel the same way, and it doesn't. It's very smooth, but it stays in place. I like the way these feel on my thumbs. They're not quite as good as what I have with the X9D. I really like these large connectors, but these should be replaceable. These are kind of in the middle. Actually, they're about the same size as these. They just, I don't know, they look nicer if nothing else. I guess maybe that's it. Am I really biased based on that? I don't know, probably. I'm getting used to the sticks here. I still haven't figured out what this button does. And this, I haven't found it to do much of anything yet either. It's all based off this stick. This has only been used for controlling the trim on this stick, which is not where I need it. If I'm gonna trim, I really need to trim this stick, so I'm gonna have to look into that a little more. Okay, according to the manual, this is a shift button, so when I go to name a model, that will probably come up. Stay tuned for that video. And this just says trim. Here, let's see. I wanna know. Okay, if I go to my model here and I go to set up the switches, say I've got 5, and if I wanna change the source, can I base it off of this button? Nope.
Trim center.
It is just a trim button. I can't even use it as a source. That would be nice. Maybe in a future version, this D-pad will be more useful, but for right now, that one doesn't seem to do much. So, yep, this other button, there you go. I have a B, capital, lowercase. I would kind of expect that, but nope, it's that's all it is. It's just a shift button. Hopefully in future versions, these become a little more useful. So as I'm holding it, I notice it feels lighter, so I actually want to measure the weight here. The QX7 is 706 grams. The X9D, 850, so it's quite a bit heavier. And the QX7 is half, 380 grams. So it doesn't have a connector to be able to hang it off of a lanyard. I saw the Instagram video where they had some plastic thing you could wrap around it, and honestly I think that looked terrible, but I don't think you'll have as big of a deal holding this because it's so much lighter. I mean, it's just way lighter, and it has just the right number of switches for me. As I mentioned in the opening video, I don't like these. They feel super floppy. They don't seem to be strong enough for me, but I like the switches. I like the switches and the placement for them a lot, so I think those will be good. So one more advantage both of these have is the fact that they have a JR style module bay. So if you are a crossfire person, you can just put that in there. Right now, this does not have a bay like that at all. It has a totally separate proprietary set of pins. I am convinced somebody will be able to 3D print an adapter and figure out what these pins are. I haven't just gotten to that yet, but there are a lot more pins there than on the other radio, so I don't know exactly what they're for, but I'm pretty sure somebody's going to figure out that conversion. For now, you can use the FrSky version for long range, but it's not quite the same. It seems like it's okay, but it's not the same as Crossfire at all. Besides the size of the radios themselves, one of the things you have to keep in mind is portability, and here's another place where the X-Lite really shines. This is the case that comes with the X9D SE. I think the one that comes with the QX7S is actually the exact same size. And it is 12 inches by 10 inches, we're going to say with rounding, versus 9 inches by 7 inches. And just side by side, there is a very, very large difference. It's also thinner too. So it's 5 inches versus 4 inches. This you can just kind of throw in your backpack. If you have a laptop bag that you carry around like I do, you might be able to throw this in and not worry about it. This takes up a whole space of its own. So that's another point to keep in mind. So I was just watching a Let's Drone Out and the guys were talking about the X-Lite radio there and mentioned the channel. Thanks for the shout out, guys. I really appreciate that. And Andy RC mentioned that his biggest concern is the throw of the sticks. Sometimes gimbals on these smaller controllers have really short throws, and I'll say right off the bat, I haven't really noticed it. Now, I haven't flown it yet. Still waiting on some weather that will cooperate, but it doesn't feel like it's a problem. But let's do some measurements and see. So I'm going to use my X9D SE with the Hall Effect gimbals because this is my main radio that I've been flying with. And if I center this on 3 inches, I've tried to get this centered so you can see it. It's right at 3/4 of an inch of throw both ways. Let's see if it's the same going up and down. Yeah, it's right at 3/4 of an inch. So that means the throttle from all the way down should be right at 1.5 inches, and it is. It's right at 1.5 inches. Now this is not super scientific. I don't have the calipers out here, but this will show us what we need to know. So the X-Lite doing the same thing. If I go straight over it and I'm looking straight down, it's not 3/4 of an inch. I'm going to say it's 5/8 of an inch. So it is less, but it's not like it's a 1/2 inch, which would be only 2/3. It's still more than the Racer Hall Effect gimbals, I think. I don't know, I haven't actually used those. So it's about 1/8 of an inch less throw. Let's make sure, same way, deal to the side. Yeah, same deal. 5/8 of an inch is what I get instead of 3/4 of an inch. For the throttle, yep, so instead of getting 1.5 inches, I get 1.25 inches. It's still not bad. I think for my flying, that'll be okay, but I guess time will tell. So if you found this useful, leave a like and a comment down below and let me know, what did I forget? What else do you want to know about them? Comparison between them. Just not in a scenario where I can do a full range comparison yet. That'll be upcoming in the future. But as far as feel goes, here's my deal. I expected to review this and then never use it again and go straight back to my X9D. Right now, I don't think that's going to be the case. I just like this radio and expect to be able to use it. All the concerns that I had, they resolved and I don't think are a problem. Mainly the switches. I was super concerned about the switches and I really like what they did. I'm going to wrap up this series with an FAQ. So any questions that you have, I will try and include them in the FAQ at the end. So until next time, remember.
Who is it again?
Drone Racer 101.
101 Mark is a lovely chap.